Hello everyone and welcome to Rob's Rogues and the Batman universe, and this is the special I've been kind of telling you guys about. This is going to be my look or overview of Death of the Family. I know we're kind of a few issues past that, and the events that have happened in Batman Incorporated kind of make this seem a little odd. As you can tell, I'm getting a lot of mileage out of my Damian Robin shirt here. But we're going to be taking a look or do more of an overview of the series as a whole that started in Batman 13 and wrapped up in Batman 17 and actually kind of went through into Teen Titans 17 with the aftermath of Death of the Family and kind of the fallout of that. So you can tell there's a lot of books to go through here. It's not going to be a critical analysis that we're going to pick apart each book. We're just going to kind of generally talk about the whole story, and what kind of makes this, hopefully for you guys, a little special as I'm trying to put all these books down, is that this was the first comic book that my wife has ever read. Once the Court of the Owls and Night of the Owls wrapped up, I was telling her that the story was so good. She's like, I might like to read a comic book with you one of these times. She's like, I'm not really sure how we should do that. So once the Death of the Family storyline was announced, I said, well, we could read them together, and that's literally what we did. We sat down with the book, and she read the left-hand side of the page, and I read the right-hand side of the page, and we kind of did it as like a story time or bedtime. Right before we went to bed, we would read the issue or issues that had come out. And for whatever reason, I always felt like I did more of the reading, and because all of the ads and everything always seemed to be on the left side of the book, and she'd always kind of giggle. And then she would read the print ad, so if it said Justice League, Throne of Atlantis, she would kind of read that whole page and kind of like, ah, funny. And she would do the sound effects and everything, so it's was quite interesting, and we'll get her take on her first experience, and not only just reading a comic book in general, but what she thought about the series as a whole, and that's kind of where this is going to go. And I asked her if she wanted to do this video with me. She's like, well, I don't really want to be on camera. So we're going to treat this, after this little video intro, we're going to kind of do this like a podcast, or as I'm going to call it, a ROBcast. Funny. So we'll extrapolate the audio from the video, and then what you'll see here will be images from the comic books and covers and all that type of stuff. And so we're going to kind of treat it like a podcast, so hopefully you guys are cool with that, but you'll be able to get to hear her and us kind of go back and forth, and just her overall experience reading comics, and then kind of talking about the story as a whole. And after reading, while we were reading the story together, I was keeping a notebook or a journal, and to try and get everything in a timeline, because when the issues were coming out, we would read Batman, then maybe, you know, Batman and Robin would be out at the same time, and Nightwing, so you'd have the Joker over here with this person, the Joker here with that person. She's like, how could the Joker be in 3 places at one time? I'm like, well, this is just when the books are coming out. So we started making notes of when the events happened. So we're going to look at this in the actual chronological order, the best way we can put it, of when the events happened. And once we started kind of doing that, I would tell her, okay, here's how I think the order should be. She's like, oh, the story kind of makes more sense that the Joker can't be in 4 places at the same time, and that's just due to that's when those books are published. So we'll be kind of making notations and going, okay, this event happens here, so this issue of Batgirl has to happen before or after such and such issue. So I kind of want to let you know that right after this little portion, we're going to be going into the audio portion of this video, I guess, or ROBcast, and but there'll be images for you guys to look at. So this could be a little bit longer or a lot of it longer than a normal video I post up here on YouTube. I will also have an MP3 version of this if anybody would just like to listen to it. I'm also entertaining the idea of doing a podcast of my own. Olivia out there, her and I have been talking back and forth about doing an action figure podcast, and I just thought about doing a podcast in general for myself to kind of go along with the Rob's Rogues videos that I'm doing. So that is what we're going to get into, is Death of the Family. and like my wife's got some funny little stories and anecdotes of some of her favorite parts, and it's kind of interesting getting a woman's perspective on things that I would go, oh, that's kind of silly. And the things that I thought might be kind of silly or didn't work for me, that she would laugh out loud and go, oh, that's funny. Or she would go, well, why is this, what's this reference? And I would tell her, and then she would be like, oh, that's funny, or I like that. And I will try and get her to do some of her sound effects, which are really hilarious. She would phonetically read somebody getting choked and how they, wrote it, or the punching sounds. So I don't want to spoil any of that. She has said she is going to, so we'll see if she in fact does do that. It's quite hilarious. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this. This will be our look at Batman Death of the Family. And like I said, we will be doing these in chronological order of the events as they happened in the story. And we'll explain why as we go through. So thanks for watching. Sit back, relax, grab a cold one or a beverage or some snacks, because we might be here just for a little bit, so hopefully you guys don't mind, but I think this is going to be really entertaining. So we will see you guys on the flip side. And now Rob's Rogues proudly presents Batman Death of the Family Overview. Thanks, guys. Welcome to Rob's Rogues. This is part of the comic book review I've been telling you guys about. This is the Death of the Family. And this one's kind of a little special, as this is the first comic book that my wife, Mrs. Rob's Rogues, has ever read. Probably right before this, her only real comic book type of reference would probably come from some of the old Batman movies that she might have seen. As she's nodding her head yes. And who is your favorite superhero, by the way? Let's get that out of the way right now.
I like Superman.
So she's already ruining this right out there. Stu, if you're listening to this, you already have one Superman fan in your corner. But by the time we had gotten together, I was still reading comics off and on. And when we had probably married a couple years, the first Batman Lego video game had come out, so we were playing that on the PlayStation. So that was, I think, probably your first introduction to probably most of the Batman supporting cast, as far as, Batman, Robin, Catwoman, Nightwing, and such.
Yeah, my brother did some with comic books, so I knew a little bit of the names, but I didn't know really anything about them.
And did he have you read anything beforehand, or?
No.
So, about the time the new 52 started, I was telling her all these, the Batman story was really good, and I think I even said early on, I think you might be kind of interested in reading this. The Court of the Owls just seemed really interesting. Mm-hmm. And I never got around to saying, hey, let's just get together and read this. So when the Death of the Family started in Batman, I had asked her, well, would you be interested in kind of reading the comics together? So that's actually what we did. We approximately, I think I just counted all the books, did I say about 19 books in total. There were a few books, and we read all the main Batman books, and then the tie-in books of, Teen Titans, Red Robin, Batgirl, Nightwing, Suicide Squad, so on and so forth, that were in there. There were 3 that I did not have her read that I read on my own, because I had kind of heard through some of the preview pages that Detective Comics was kind of sort of doing the Death of the Family, where the Joker would kind of pop in, or Batman would make some reference to the Death of the Family, but it was running in its own story, and I think it was probably a little overwhelming at first, I would assume, reading not just one main Batman book, which we could have done, but I thought the story, as you're hearing our cell phones go off, We're doing this very real in our home, sitting on our couch with the TV on mute. So, but not only just reading one main story, but trying to richen it up a little bit and reading all the tie-in issues. Was that confusing to read? All of them kind of out of sequence, or?
I don't know if out of sequence was so much confusing as much as it was having never read comic books before, reading them, one this week and then maybe 2 weeks before we got a chance to sit down and read them again. Because when we were saying we were reading them together, we were literally sitting on the bed reading them together, not one of us read it and then the other. So sometimes weeks would go by before we got a chance to catch up on 2 or 3 comics, and so it was a little disjointed that way.
And what side of the book did you read?
Almost always I read the left side.
And who did the majority of the reading of the actual story?
That would be you. However, I did read the majority of the credits because those were all on the left-hand side.
Yes, so if there was an advertisement for the Green Lantern story that was going on, you read all of the ads on that page?
Yes.
Or whatever it was?
Yes.
So if I was reading the right-hand page and then Batman went down the hall and the next page said...
Green Arrow, the CW advertisement, I read it.
So that was always kind of fun. And I said, okay, that's funny. But she would continue to usually read the whole entire page. So this isn't necessarily going to be a, in-depth analysis, and we're going to go through all 19 books that we read. I wrote up like an 8-page little draft and synopsis to kind of not keep us on track, but kind of go through some issues. Because it has been, 3 months probably?
That sounds about right.
That since the story first started, to be like, what was issue 16 again? Or what was issue so-and-so again? So we're not going to go through bit by bit. I did put the comics in order chronologically that the events should have happened. But after my wife and I's portion here, I'll do a quick little follow-up. Some of the images that you're seeing on the screen, I've taken from the comics pages or the Comixology little previews that you got, so you have something to kind of look at while things are going on. Probably one of the first slides, if you were to go back to the beginning, is the actual chronological order that I kind of see these books in. That might have made it a little bit easier. I kind of wish when Scott Snyder wrote this story and he went out to the fellow Batman writers of Batman and Robin and Batgirl, said, okay, here's part of your story that you're going to do. All these events have to coincide in chronological order. Write a story that you want. But sometimes we would be reading Batgirl dealing with the Joker, and then we would read Nightwing dealing with the Joker. So you kind of had that feeling of, wow, the Joker's in 8 places all at one time, which, really can't happen. But that's just the way the books monthly and weekly came out, so everybody hopped on it. So again, at the end of this little portion, I'll kind of go through the correct timeline. But overall, with it being the death of the family that I was telling you about, did you think of like we were going to lose somebody? After that first issue with the 2-headed lion, a little cub, and the Joker coming back to get his face, and the police precinct, and the last page being the Joker with a hammer attacking Alfred in that last panel, did you have any premonitions beforehand what you would be reading or not reading? Or did you not have any opinions at the beginning?
Well, it sounded like somebody was going to die with the title of it, so there was a part of me that kind of wondered if that would happen, but then the other part of me was going back to traditional Batman where, well, nobody can die. But yet, when I hear you talking about the newer comic books that you're reading, and they kill characters off, I wasn't really sure.
Yeah, traditionally I have a little note here, the first death in the family was the killing of the second Robin, Jason Todd, and that was an 80s story, which this is kind of, with the whole death in the family, death of the family, that's kind of a continuation. And then the Robin comic, number 175, they had a death of a family, which was the early stages of the Batman RIP, where Batman, quote-unquote, dies, actually goes into time. So this is kind of like the third incarnation of the death of, death in, or death of a type of a storyline. So for a Batman fan like me, I thought instantly, well, somebody's going to die in this. They're going to kill Alfred. They're going to kill Robin. Somebody is going to die. So that was my first take on it. Is like, well, who is it going to be? And that last page is like, oh my gosh, he may go after Alfred. So, do you have a favorite like Batman character, hero or villain? And that includes Harley Quinn, Catwoman, Batboy, as she would probably call Nightwing, or any of the other former Robins. But is there anybody that you kind of like, especially if we're playing the Lego video game, who would you pick?
Well, definitely not Batgirl. I don't like her outfit. When we're playing the video game, I like Harley Quinn and Catwoman because I like that they can jump. But I like Harley Quinn because she just seems funny to me. But as far as on the outside, I love Penguin, so I kind of lean toward Mr. Penguin, but I also like Harley Quinn. Okay. So those would probably be the two. But if I had to pick a good character, it'd either be Batman or Catwoman, but I know she kind of plays both sides.
Nice. Now, from what you remember of seeing what Harley Quinn looked like, did you have any like opinions of what she was wearing or how little she was wearing, if you kind of remember the little halter top with...
That didn't really surprise me because comic books are generally written for boys, and so they generally have busty women that are scantily clad.
Yes, I'm sure that all the female readers... I think you've made a couple comments of seeing, when we got to the Teen Titans, and seeing Starfire wearing very little. I think you were kind of like, well, she's not wearing much. Or I can't remember what you said when we first turned that first splash page, and it's basically Roy Harper in his trucker hat and Starfire's boobs on the page.
Yeah. Kind of reminds me of the Superman action figure you have that she tore the symbol off of her chest.
That would be Power Girl. So, people who know who Power Girl is, she doesn't have a symbol on the front of her. It's just her giant cleavage. So, managed to work in boobs and cleavage twice into this little podcast here. So, as I'm kind of like going through notes here, when we got into stuff of the Suicide Squad, that I believe you were aware just from the video game and little things I told you that Harley and the Joker were basically a couple, but they had been estranged for a year or anything like that. Did you have any like reaction to the Joker's first meeting with Harley and her reaction to him? Or were you surprised that they were, I guess, fighting or anything like that?
A little, because I was confused about the guy that they were at the funeral for.
And that was a part of the death of the family that kind of, I think, made it a little hard for her to follow, that I was having to say, okay, this is Deadshot that's dead, this is actually Harley's new boyfriend, and, you know, she might be saying, well, I thought she was with the Joker. It's like, well, this is New 52, he's been gone. So, some of the books were kind of already in the middle of their own story, so I was having to do a little bit of exposition before we read, and even having to pull out Detective Comics #1 in the New 52 and going, oh yeah, by the way, this is something I want to ask you, and saying, oh, by the way, the Joker had his face cut off.
Yeah, that was gross.
So when I pulled out the very first issue of Batman, I've got it here in my hand here, and seeing this nice picture of the Joker, I mean, other than gross, were you kind of instantly like, oh, that's not what I thought he was going to be, or...
It was darker than what I expected, because I guess I always envisioned comic books as like the old 1950s Batman with the, you know, pretty colors and the, you know, little boys in tights. But that was kind of what I had always envisioned with Batman. So this was a little darker than what I was expecting. But the one that bothered me the most was the one where there was maggots. That one was a little too much for me. The others I could stomach, but the maggot one kind of...
That would be Batman and Robin 15 and 16, where Damian goes in to try and find Alfred, and they're at the zoo, and the Joker's got him held captive, and the Joker takes his face off, turns it upside down, so he's looking through his mouth and talking out through his eye holes, and then there's bugs and maggots, and that I think that might have been the one that you were kind of like, can we get through this any faster to read?
Yeah, I didn't want to read that one. I didn't like that. The other, it was more gruesome, like I said, than I expected, but I figured that out, you know, in the first book when everything was going on, that it was going to be a lot darker than the Bam Pals of, you know, the 1950s cartoon and television shows that I remembered.
Did having watched the like Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises kind of prepare you a little bit for like the darker tone of Batman in like correlation to the comics, or was that just kind of you were still thinking, oh, this is a movie and the comic books will still be, you know, Bam Pow, golly gee, Batman, let's go get him? Or did you go, oh, the comic books are kind of keeping up with the times?
I wasn't sure because, you know, I didn't know a lot about the depth and backstories of all of these different characters and where comic books had gone, because my experience was going from Michael Keaton playing Batman and Danny DeVito playing the Penguin, and then to Val Kilmer playing Batman, and then, you know, George Clooney playing Batman. And when George Clooney played Batman, it was back to the silliness with, you know, Jim Carrey being the Riddler. It was back to being that kind of corny stuff, so I wasn't really sure. They've gone back and forth, because Michael Keaton and George Clooney seem more silly in their roles, and Val Kilmer and Christian Bale seem more serious and dark in there. So I didn't really know for sure what to expect.
I'm all kinds of impressed right now. She went through like most of the Batman characters in both those movies, and I was like, wow. I think Batman with Michael Keaton, the first one was taking itself seriously. The second one with the Penguin was kind of a little loopy. And I'm like not disagreeing. I think the Val Kilmer was trying to take itself serious and like brighten itself up with a lot of colors, but yeah, definitely the Batman and Robin movie with George Clooney was, and all Batman fans right now are probably listening to this going, oh yeah, we all hate that movie.
Well, I basically just remember all of them because I thought they were all hot when I watched the movie.
Yeah, there you go. So the women are like, oh, it's George Clooney, he's from ER, or he was on The Facts of Life, I liked him. So then all us guys are like, oh, what a tool.
And the Golden Girls.
That's right. She's a huge Golden Girls fan. And I'm not going to admit that I watch a lot of the Golden Girls and I could start quoting those. But this is a Batman wind-up. Did you have a hard time, you kind of said it, but keeping up in all of the Batman family characters, especially when we get into the Teen Titans and there's a group of 6 kids, with Red Robin being the Batman family, and you have Red Hood and the Outlaws, with Red Hood being a member of the Batman family. Was it hard once we got into some of those books and you have, you know, instead of reading just Batman in his book and Nightwing in his book with a few supporting characters to going to now you have 8 supporting characters all in one book and trying to figure out, you know, everything that was going on or who to follow and who's who?
The Teen Titans were confusing because you don't collect as much of them, so I'm not as familiar with those. As far as the different Robins, they're confusing because there's like 15 different Robins, but because I follow you around at comic book stores helping you find New 52 comic books or action figures, I won't say what I call them,
thank you,
that I'm a little bit more familiar with the different characters because of helping you look for things at stores, and you've explained who was who, so I know what I'm looking for. But with the Teen Titans, you don't really do a lot of collecting of them, so you haven't mentioned most of those characters to me as far as something we're looking for or trying to find at a store. So they were a lot more confusing because I didn't have a lot of background information going into it about any of them.
And the only reason I'm on Teen Titans is because Tim Drake, the third Robin, that is the only book he's in. So some people won't consider it a Batman-oriented book, but I'll argue and say that is just as much of a Batman book as Red Hood and the Outlaws is, because you have Jason, who is the second Robin, who's been brought back to life, yada yada, whatever.
he's the only Batman character in that book, and Tim Drake, the third Robin, is the only Batman character in Teen Titans. So those are the only two reasons why I'm on those two books, just because that those were two of my favorite Robins, yada yada, etc., and all that type of stuff. So I don't talk about Teen Titans that much, because you have 8 characters, or 6 or 7, whatever it is, in one book, and I'm only getting it to read one, so they're flushing out a lot of stories all at one time to give weight to all these characters. So you just probably don't hear me talk about that as much. It's usually who the current Robin is. And that was something, by the time Batman 17 come out, the very end of... first of all, before we get into there, once we get into the story and each of the main Batman family characters, did you understand the reason why the Joker was taking them and saying, you're making Batman weak, Batman's much stronger without you? Once we got into that part of the book, did your opinion change to maybe who would be dying, or what would happen to those people as the Joker was kidnapping them?
I really didn't know what to expect. Going back one thing on jumping back a little bit about, you were saying with the Teen Titans and the different Robins, it does to me seem like there's 12 different Robins, because every time I turn around you're talking about a different one. The question that I have is, what is going on with Batman that he has so much employment turnover? I question if he has some HR problems, or what he needs to have done. If Alfred's not doing his job as far as educating staffing when they're employed, I really wonder, from the business aspect that I come from, what exactly it is that Batman is doing that he can't keep a Batboy or a Batgirl around.
Well, and sometimes you'll hear me complain about our HR department. They know just enough, and it's like, I'll get back with you. People will kind of get mad at the Robins. I kind of look at it at Alfred like, you're basically running this ship. You shouldn't be having employee turnover as highly as you are. Maybe you shouldn't be letting 13-year-olds run around in bright red, yellow costumes. But that
does seem a little bit unfair that Batman's in black at night and Robin's wearing, red and yellow to be easily spotted so as to let Batman escape. So that's probably why the Robins are all being killed or injured, as opposed to Batman, who always slinks away. Sorry for those of you who are Batman fans, but it does kind of make me seem like it's a little bit unfair playing field.
And I tend to gravitate toward the bright character, the golly gee, Batman, that's awesome. So as the Joker was taking them one by one, for all the varying reasons, and pointing out each Robin, all of their flaws, and Batgirl too. Before we get to the tray, did you have any reaction to Batgirl, other than sometimes you don't like her, that the two characters that the Joker has done the most to, being Red Hood, Jason Todd, and then Barbara Gordon, Batgirl, knowing me saying, okay, the Joker shot Batgirl, paralyzed her, and the Joker actually killed the second Robin previously. Did those stories do anything for you while you were reading those characters' motivations of why they hated the Joker, or was it just you were just reading a story and didn't have any?
Pretty much just reading, but I guess I kind of logically get the whole fight between Batgirl and the Joker, given the fact that her dad is constantly trying to lock him up and put him away. I can understand him having a little bit of resentment toward his little girl. So it doesn't surprise me that they have a lot of fights back and forth between the two of them. And speaking of Commissioner Gordon, it seemed like there was something that happened at the police precinct, that he was poisoned or something, but I never felt like it was really resolved all that much, and then he just kind of disappeared. He wasn't in the rest of the comics.
That was something, as I was going back through, I noticed that you've heard the analogy of, this guy's a bleeder, he's a bleeder of hearts or whatever, and the Joker, put something on the paper or a chemical that actually causes Commissioner Gordon to, start bleeding profusely through his skin. And that was something I was he goes to the hospital, and that's it. And going through, and that's early on, I think that's in the second part of the Batman story, that happens to Gordon, and we don't see Commissioner Gordon again for the rest of the whole entire run. Not until actually after the conclusion in the Nightwing issue, with Nightwing dealing with the fallout of Death of the Family and all that stuff. That actually, I read that tonight going, that's right, Commissioner Gordon was never around again after that. And Commissioner Gordon never appears in the Batgirl title at all, which I was kind of surprised, since Commissioner Gordon was really tormenting, the Joker was really tormenting Commissioner Gordon back in the 80s in The Killing Joke, after having just shot his daughter and then running Commissioner Gordon through a funhouse. So
I find it interesting that throughout all the different Batman stories, whether it's, the Christopher Nolan movies or, the 1950s Batman or whatever it is, they always view Batman as a vigilante and as a bad guy, but yet Commissioner Gordon disappeared going to the hospital like 2 stories in, and Batman's left to clean up the mess. It seems a little unfair that he's always viewed as the vigilante, but yet Commissioner Gordon's always nowhere to be found. He magically disappears. It's kind of like, makes you wonder, like the whole Clark Kent is, never around when Superman's there. That's for you, Stu. Why is Commissioner Gordon never around when Batman's around?
Nice. They say they're on a rooftop together, but are they really on a rooftop together? And a couple of last little points here.
Batman probably just has split personality.
Split personality. He has a triple split personality. Can you have a triple split? I don't know. The serving trays that we were shown early on, I guess probably midway through the tail end of all of the side characters' books, seeing the bloody serving trays that the Joker was, getting ready to open up. What did you think was going to be underneath the tray as the story progressed, or even the beginning, or however?
I wasn't really sure, but when we got to the end and they were all wearing the bloody bandages, I was really afraid of another maggot sort of scene and was not really wanting to turn the page on that one.
So when we're in Batman 17 now, the conclusion of Death of the Family, when Batman is strapped in his chair, and they're in kind of sort of the Batcave, the first part of the Batcave, which we find out the Joker never actually made it into all the way of the Batcave. When he pulls up the tray and we see the faces of all of the sidekicks, I remember you had a reaction to that. Care to say, share, or?
I don't remember exactly what my reaction was. What I do know, and I don't think I ever shared this with you, was I pretty much quit looking at the pictures after that until you said it was okay.
I didn't really realize that. So when you had to read, I think you were actually kind of reading a little bit briskly. You were like, were you just focusing on the words? Like, I'm just reading the words and... Yeah,
and again, with the left side of the page, I had a lot of, CW presents Arrow.
I guess I really didn't even think about that. So when it's revealed that this whole story has been one giant joke, the Joker is playing on everybody. He's trying to marry Batgirl. He's telling each of the former Robins and Batgirl that you're bringing them down, and telling all this mean stuff, and then making them think that they get their faces cut off to be like, haha, fooled you. Did that surprise you at all, or were you just kind of like, oh, thank God?
Yeah, I mean, I know he's called the Joker, but I guess I really didn't think that he was going to pull off a big joke like that. I thought he just, tormented people, and that was his way of being a jokester. I didn't realize, that he would plan this, giant fiendish plot just to say, haha, gotcha.
So when it's finally revealed, now I didn't know if you caught this in the book, that... when the Allies, before they get captured, keep asking Bruce, has the Joker been in the Batcave? He's coming after, he's kidnapping a former girlfriend of Dick Grayson's. He's kidnapped Barbara Gordon's mother. Did you think the Joker knew who they were? Or, I guess what I was trying to ask is, did you catch at the end of the story that I guess the Joker does know who they are, but somebody had said the analogy, it's like if, I put my hand over my face, the Joker literally looks like it like, well, where'd Rob go? I don't know where he is.
Yeah, again, I have to apologize here to those of you who are superhero fans, but putting a mask on Green Arrow doesn't really hide who he is, or Clark Kent taking off his glasses, or Batman going, I'm Batman. Doesn't really do anything to really hide who they are. So I think people could pretty quickly figure out that when they're at a big party at Bruce Wayne's house and, something goes down and all of a sudden Bruce Wayne's nowhere to be found, but Batman shows up, I think you got to be pretty dense there in Gotham City to not figure that out. So given that the Joker can plan all of this stuff and orchestrate all of these things, I'm kind of guessing that behind Batman and his crew that the Joker's probably the next smartest person there in Gotham City.
That's pretty much our wrap up. Well, I guess I did have a couple small minor points because we did kind of read a couple things out of sequence, but you were getting ready to say something, so go ahead.
Just a couple of my thoughts on having never been a comic book reader and starting out with this. I know how people always talk, I watch Big Bang and how, you're not even allowed to breathe on comic books, that as it was time for us to read this, I was like terrified to touch the book and put fingerprints on it to move it over into my side because I was afraid that I was going to like damage the mint condition. So I that was a little scary, and I had to make sure when I was reading that, there's no spittle on the page or anything like that because I didn't want to ruin his comic books. But the other thing was, again, I read the left side of the page in its entirety, whether it was credits as to who the artist and graphic designers were, or if it was the, CW advertisement.
And she read everything. So if it said a writer, Scott Snyder, artist Greg Capullo, she would sound out those names. So if it had 22 inkers and 17 colorists, she read it all.
I also read any references to previous books, like see Batman 52 for the rest of the story. So I think I might have irritated Rob thoroughly. But to me, when you read comic books, the best part about the comic books is the, onomatopoeia?
The onomatopoeia, yes.
So
when somebody gets choked a couple times or a sound effect, the choking was the best one. And I want to see if you'll do this on video. But when you see the written word GRRG, whatever the onomatopoeia is, what sound did you make when somebody's getting choked? We laughed hysterically.
We hadn't gotten to any of those onomatopoeia moments yet. The first thing that I read as far as that was when someone was strangled, and I did that sound, and Rob had no idea that I was going to actually read all the sounds. He was kind of skipping over them, and I'm like, no, if we're going to read this, we're going to read this, so we have to read it in its entirety. And so I made him then do all of the sounds. And then in the last book, there were a lot of ... dots. So since you can't read that, we were therefore forced to act that out by simply holding our chin with a discerning look.
Like the pose, the statue of the thinker.
Yes.
Like the ... dots are representing, I'm not saying anything, I'm getting ready to think, letting you, the reader, know the character's getting ready to say something. So when we would see the 3 dots or 4 dots or whatever it was, we would actually do the thinker pose and then start laughing. Like put your thumb underneath your chin and your first finger just below your bottom lip. That is the kind of the
And if he skipped any of those, I made him go back and reread them because, again, to me, that was supposed to be the most iconic thing about comic books is the bam and pow, and so I insisted that we were not going to skip over those, especially also, it kind of lightened things a little bit when they were discussing things like the maggot faces and those sort of things, by being able to laugh about the noises and the kabams and the pows. It also definitely tested my phonics skills because some of those sounds are a little bit difficult to sound out.
Yeah. Something I think you said before is comic books don't always necessarily follow, you read left to right down the page and then you go over to page 2, that sometimes we would read at the top of the left page and go clear across to the right and then back down to the left, or we would get a giant splash page, especially if it had Kid Flash running around. He would be all over the place in a panel and we could literally be reading the book in 12 different directions. Did that did you know that things like that were happening, or did that make it harder for you to read and follow?
It did make it a little bit harder to read at times. There were times where I had to ask you, like, okay, where do I go next? Or I would read a square and it would, or panel.
Panel, yeah.
And it didn't make sense. And then I would realize that I was supposed to jump back and forth between two different panels. So my note to the artists is, for girls, you need to have a girls version where things are numbered.
So in the thought balloon, and the trippy ones, or you have two characters on a panel, and their bubbles interlink with each other. So Damien says something to Dick, and then Dick replies, and all their bubbles get interlinked together, so you've got to be able to follow the chain of bubbles back and forth. And if you're just like reading it word for word like a book and go, oh, because then it doesn't go, and then Robin said, and then Nightwing said.
And I was trying to follow like where the little point slides down to whose mouth is talking, but on some of them, when they're going back and forth really fast, it wasn't really clear. So that kind of took some getting used to, and again, I had to ask for help on some of them about where do I go next. And especially if the panels didn't all line up, because sometimes it was hard to tell, am I supposed to go up and down or left to right?
The last point I'm going to make that, the last couple here real quick, that when Batman 17 came out, I think that was the week I was sick, was supposed to be the end of that. I got it the following Friday or Tuesday, whatever that was when it came out, and then we still didn't read it for a couple days, and then Batman Incorporated 8 came out, and most people know that that is the death of Damian. So the death of the family was kind of one of those that a lot of Batman fans said, oh, somebody's going to die in this book. So when we get to the end of it, that Batman and the Joker have their confrontation, and Batman leans in and says, you know, you really didn't want to know who I am. That's why you didn't go all the way into the cave, because you were afraid to know. But I wanted to know who you were, and gets ready to lean in and say, you know, who the Joker is. Then the Joker shocks Batman, jumps, falls down the waterfall, and presumed kind of sort of dead. Were you surprised that we read this whole entire thing and nobody actually died?
I was kind of torn, because I'm used to the whole thing, like all of the movies where it always has to end happy, that the good guy can't die. So there was a part of me that, like, all along kind of anticipated that the Joker would die. But yet I know in comic books no one's ever really dead. It's kind of like a giant soap opera, that they always find a way to come back, whether it's a facelift or this is my twin Drake. There's always something
Friends
in there.
Friends reference there, by the way. Hopefully somebody caught that. That's awesome.
That that they always find a way to come back. The one thought that I did have is that I would never want to be caught in a poker game with the Joker or Batman, because they definitely have the bluff down.
Yeah. So with Batman Incorporated 8, that I actually read that first, and knowing that Damian Robin dies in that book, and then having told you that, and then we read Batman 17 and knowing, well, nobody dies, the scene in the book that kind of I may have teared up on the inside a little bit is after, you know, Batman gets up out of the chair and all the chairs light on fire, and Batman breaks the ceiling, that all the water comes crashing down, and they start unbandaging themselves, and you have the panel with Damian saying, you know, just tell me, how is it really bad? And Batman, you realize that, oh, their faces are intact, and you have this embrace of Batman and Damian holding on to each other, and Bruce saying, it's okay, oh, it's okay, Damian. That kind of bothered me a little bit, knowing, you know,
it's really not okay.
It's really not okay. That was knowing that Batman Incorporated was going on at the same time all this was. I would have kind of thought that the writers would have gotten together and shoehorned this in, that we get to the end of 17 and dun dun dun, read Batman Incorporated number 8 for the conclusion of the story, and then Grant Morrison kills off Damian, and that book. So that's a little bit of a tangent there.
Did you spoiler alert that?
Oh, spoiler alert. Sorry, I'll have to go back and put that in there. But it's long enough now. We're almost coming up a week. It's been a week since Damien's been gone, and it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks since Death of the Family's actually been over. So most people may not even click on this and go, Rob, you guys are so far behind the times.
Well, and from the times that I've gone to those comic book stores with you, it seems like pretty much you're like Damien's only fan. So probably most people are kind of like when the Wicked Witch gets the house dropped on her, that,
Yeah.
they're okay with this moving on. But
that's one of those people like, oh, I hate Damien, kill him off. And then people start to grow to like him, but there's that division of like, good, I'm glad he's gone. So that's going to kind of wrap it up. I may do a little bit at the end by myself here. Now that you not only have read your very first comic, but you have read, 19 comics in total, would you be up to reading maybe like a Superman title at some point? The same writer of the main Batman title is doing his own Superman story. How was your overall experience reading a comic book?
Oh, I enjoyed it. I would do... I would read Superman, or if anyone out there is a artist that draws these that happens to be watching this, if you can draw the Green Lantern like Ryan Reynolds, I would totally be up for reading that.
Nice. And as people are going, we didn't like the Ryan Reynolds Green Lantern movie, but I did, and we did. So there. And
I did like the fact that they acknowledged the fact that you put a green mask on a guy and don't change his voice, and all of a sudden, oh, he's the Green Lantern, that Blake Lively looks at him and says, yeah, you're still the same guy. You're still Hal Jordan. I can tell. So I kind of liked Green Lantern and that story. And that one seems a little bit more lighthearted with the fact that he can turn his ring into anything. And Superman always ends happy, so I like those. Batman's a little dark for me. I think I would probably prefer one of the more It Always Ends Happy stories, or the 1950s with the na-na-na-na-na-na type of story where, they get in their fake car that you can tell is not really driving down the road, and it all is happy at the end.
In Lego Batman 2, what character, once he was playable, who did you play as all the time? Superman. And in the Batman video game, if nobody's played it, which I'm sure most people have, all the Batman Danny Elfman theme song stops, and it's the Superman theme. Anytime that she can grab the controller and get Superman up in the air, it's the dun 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 dun, that whole thing. The last thing, Superman Man of Steel movie opens this summer. Is that something we're going to skip or go see?
You make me go to all of them. I generally enjoy them. I will say we go with another group of friends that we go as couples, and Rob does always train me before we go, so I have to watch all the backstories, so that way when the guys are sitting together and the girls are sitting together, I can help educate the other girls as to what's going on, because we generally are pretty lost with not having read the comics and the backstories.
I am training my own Penny. I'm not saying I'm Leonard. She may actually say I'm more Howard Wolowitz, which may be kind of sad, but hey, at least I get the hot girl. So
I'm kind of a combination between Sheldon and Penny. But I will say whenever we go into comic book stores, I do always make a Penny reference of the fact that when I walk in, pretty much everyone in the store turns around and goes, "It's a girl!"
And when the people are playing their game, she's like, "What are those guys doing over there?" I'm like, let's not attract attention to ourselves. Let's just get the books and not worry about them doing gaming. Why are they here on a Tuesday? Let's not worry about it. Let's go. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in. I know as we were getting ready to do this, I had 8 pages of notes. I was going to go through everything, and I only briefly touched on it. And I'm losing my train of thought right here. But I thought, we'll just wing it. I just kind of wanted to get her thoughts and opinions after it. And as I'm looking at the clock, we have been on this half. We've been doing this for almost 40 minutes. So that's kind of the nod from the producer of it's 12:07 in the morning on a Sunday. Work is Monday. So we'll wrap this up. thanks everybody for supporting Rob's Rogues and my support on the Batman universe as always. Thanks everyone. Stay tuned. Just after this portion, I will wrap up and I'll go kind of through the timeline of Death of the Family if you are so interested. So this has been
Rob's Rogues.
And we will talk to you guys next time. Thanks everyone. Stay tuned for afterwards. Bye.